It's time now for a look at some business news. And as stocks continue to slide on Wall Street, they're on the cusp of what's known in the business as a bear market. France 24's Cole Stangler has more on what that all means.
Yeah, that's right, Sharon. Now, if the loss is piling up, it's looking increasingly possible now. Now, it's not exactly the most technically advanced term, but it is a useful signpost for investors. A bear market refers to an index or a stock that's down at least 20% from a recent peak. Now, that's already the case for the tech-heavy NASDAQ, but now the S&P 500 is on the brink, too. As you can see here, the index down almost 19% from its high earlier this year, the beginning of 2022. As you can see, that peak there up in January. On a plunge now, not seen really since the early days, I should say, of COVID. Now, bear market doesn't necessarily mean that a recession is coming, but it does mean that investors are feeling anxious. Today, there's at least a few reasons why. Chief among them, of course, are rising interest rates. A tool to fight inflation. They also mean higher borrowing costs. Now, the war in Ukraine has also pushed up prices even more, energy in particular. There's also growing concern about China, with COVID taking a toll on the world's second largest economy. Now, on average, bear markets take about 13 months to go from their highest to lowest point, though that most recent one back in 2020 was the shortest in history. Well, let's turn now to the markets. Thursday was another rough day on Wall Street, though. European markets in positive territory here to close out the week. As you can see there, the FTSE up over 1%, more modest gains in Paris and Frankfurt. Shares for Air France KLM are up over 2%. That's after the firm announced it opened talks with private equity firm Apollo over obtaining a €500 million cash injection. Let's look now to the Asian markets, also posting gains. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong leading the pack, up nearly 3% there, with shares up also in Tokyo, Shanghai, and in Seoul. Well, meanwhile, inflation in Japan has hit a 7-year high. The country's core consumer price index rose 2.1% last month when compared to a year earlier. While that's below the hike seen in other advanced economies, it's above the target set by Japanese central bankers. The hike stems largely from rising import costs, with energy and raw materials pushing up prices. For those reasons, policymakers are seen as unlikely to raise interest rates. Well, next up, the Canadian government has moved to ban Huawei from its high-speed 5G networks. Citing national security reasons, authorities also extended the restriction to ZTE Corp. Both are seen as being close to the Chinese military and intelligence services, though they've denied those allegations. Canada is the last of the so-called Five Eyes intelligence alliance to exclude Huawei. The firms will be required to remove their 5G equipment by June 2024. Take a listen.
Let me be very clear. We will always protect the safety and security of Canadians, and will take any actions necessary to safeguard our telecommunication infrastructure. Telecommunication companies in Canada will not be permitted to include in their networks products or services that put our national security at risk.
And finally, to Sri Lanka. The country is in the midst of a punishing economic crisis and formally defaulted on its debt this week. Now concerns growing over a potential food shortage, though there's already a lack of fuel. Joseph Keane reports.
Motorists in Colombo faced hours of long queues for petrol. But by the time they got to the front, many stations had run dry.
We are started in the queue at 10 a.m. So we like at 2:30, now 4.5 hours, we are pulling our tuk-tuk and bikes here. So when we reach here, they said yeah, they finished their petrol. But we asking the solution for this. So every day we're suffering. Yesterday also we did the same thing.
The country is now almost without gasoline. At some pumps in the commercial capital, people lined up holding jerry cans as troops patrolled the streets. However, residents said most people were staying at home due to the lack of transport. A chronic foreign exchange shortage and rising oil prices have contributed to the fuel crisis. But some locals claimed corruption has been playing a hand.
There is a petrol in petrol station, but they are not given to poor people. They are given high-class people only. Oh, this is a big problem for this country.
Protesters blocked main roads to demand gas and fuel in the city on Thursday. The new Prime Minister, who was appointed over the weekend, said the government was working to release fuel shipments, which had arrived at Colombo's port from India. Authorities urged the public not to crowd petrol stations until the deliveries are completed.
Yeah, Sharon, last night G7 finance ministers said they supported efforts to provide debt relief to Sri Lanka. That draft statement set to be finalized later today before the end of their meeting.
We'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the afternoon. Cole Stangler from our business desk, thanks so much for joining us with that.